Right. And then, like I say, just, when you hear it again, it's like you realize, what happened, and you ask the question. And as is done previously, King Ahasuerus sought the advice before acting. I guess that's something that at least, he's not just, flying off on his own. He's asking advice and wanting to know what his advisors might suggest. He asked, who is in the court? And, there's a question that leads to that later about why did he ask that? Did he hear somebody out there? Or is he somebody, I can imagine Haman was out there. He's wanting to get his opportunity to go talk about Mordecai and let's go hang him on this gallows. I've already built the gallows. Let's get him hung. Let's get it over with. He may be out there pacing. That may have been why King Ahasuerus heard somebody out there. But it turns out that Haman had just entered the outer court. And, that goes on to say, if we might find it strange that, that anybody would be in the place in such an unlikely hour, remember what we just read, that Haman's wife said, let's do this and go early in the morning and go ahead and get this thing knocked out. Let's get it taken care of. And, trying to go in the first thing in the morning to suggest that Mordecai's fate. And perhaps Haman wanted to be the first to speak to the king that day, but regardless, his presence at the unusual time betrayed his utter disdain for Mordecai, if nothing else. So imagine, Haman's there, he's kind of waiting, and all of a sudden the king says, hey, who's in the court? Bring him in. And he's thinking, wow, this is great. I'm looking forward to this. This couldn't be any better than what it is. I'm here early, the king's ready to see me, we can get this thing moving, we can get this thing going. And when the question comes out from the king, what shall be done for this man whom the king delights to honor? Haman had no idea that he had just got through reading the Chronicles and that he had felt that something needed to be done for Mordecai, who basically ended up saving his life. And, Haman, his arrogance, his, self-importance, everything else, immediately thinks, who else could it be talking about besides me? Yeah, go ahead and let's put the praise on. Let's go ahead and add it on thick. And he mentions too that he had a lot of wealth and everything. He really didn't need that, but he really wanted that next step. He wanted to be treated like the king. He wanted to be arraigned in the robe and ride around the horse and proclaimed throughout the streets. So that's where we see Haman thought in his heart, whom could the king delight and honor more than me? His assumptions, however, was wrong. Ahasuerus wanted to honor the very person Haman wanted to hang. I mean, what a contradiction right there. He's ready to hang this guy because he's so evil, and then I'm going to be allowed and esteemed above everybody. And the roles are basically reversed, aren't they? So, unwittingly, Haman suggested the grandest treatment possible. He wanted to just, let's lavish it out there. Let's make it, put it on thick. Let's do this. So thinking the honor be for himself at the top of 75, Haman described how the honoree should be adorned with a robe worn by the king, placed upon the king's own horse, emblazoned with a royal crest, and led through the city by one of the king's dignitaries. It doesn't even stop at that. It's like his own construction. They would also proclaim, thus shall it be done to the man who the king delights to honor. It's not only riding on the horse and having the robe and everything else, but, proclaiming to everybody that this honor is bestowed from the king on this person. And then Haman did not need additional wealth or even promotion. His vanity led to the insatiable desire for honor. He was not the king. He wanted to be treated as one. So we can see right here, imagine, this was your situation. You're coming in, you're wanting to put Mordecai on the gallows, and then this happens. Could you imagine what it would be like? If you're Haman and you're thinking, wow, this is not what I had in mind for today. I was excited, I was ready to get this ball rolling. This was definitely not what I had in mind, was it? Right. That even puts him in that role, right? Exactly. Yep. It just adds insult to injury or whatever. Exactly. And I was thinking about it too. Could you imagine being a fly on the wall during that conversation? I mean, we talk about it, it's like on the next section, 75, that Haman ordered to honor. Said we can almost see the disappointment on Haman's face when he was told to bestow his suggested honors on Mordecai the Jew who sits within the king's gate. You can imagine he's in there, he's being summoned in, he's ready to get this thing going with Mordecai. Then all the praise, he's like, wow, this is better than what I thought it was going to be. This is going to be great. I'll do that, and then we'll go hang Mordecai. And then it comes out that we're going to bestow this honor on Mordecai. You can imagine it's like, do what? Wait, I thought you were going to bestow this honor on me, and now you're going to tell me that I've got to go take care, like Jim mentioned, I've got to lead Mordecai around and talking about the king is praising this person. This is not what I had in mind, not at all. So his dream of being treated like royalty was short-lived. Even worse, the prize he sought was reserved for his enemy. And evidently, King Ahasuerus was unaware of Haman's hatred for Mordecai. Such, however, would not have been true of those who saw the Agagite leading the Jew through the city, a fact that added to Haman's humiliation. Nevertheless, he obeyed the king's command, which in a way I'm almost surprised that he did. But let's go back to that hatred he had for Mordecai that says that the king did not know about. On page 37, going back in another former text, I'm going to read the first two verses and then verses 1 and 2 of Esther chapter 3 and verses 5 and 6. This kind of tells about why Haman was so upset with Mordecai. So after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Methodah the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage. Verse 5, when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. So you can see from the very beginning, it was not just about Mordecai, it was Mordecai and all the Jews. He was ready to wipe out everybody. And that's what plays even more into this banquet. And when Esther, as we're going to see in this next, after we get through with this section, we see that it was brought up, this hatred from, that's been burning deep within Haman, and, the case that was presented to the king. And again, you got Haman who has already been, set up once for failure. Now he's getting ready to be set up a second time. So after this, after the parading through the town and everything, we got two different situations. Mordecai, he just returned to his normal place at the king's gate. He was still stricken. He was still worried about his family and the Jews. But then Haman, there again, he returned home, didn't he? He did not merely go back to his normal routine. Instead, he hurried to his house, mourning with his head covered. And then we see the contrast of the events, which caused Mordecai and Haman to mourn. The former, Mordecai mourned because of learning the potential destruction of the Jewish people. And the latter, Haman, mourned after being personally humiliated. And Mordecai's mourning was selfless. The mourning of Haman was selfish. So Haman goes back to his house again, back to his wife Zeresh, the next day, and told his wife of everything that had happened to him. The first time, she was so, let's go, let's build a gallows, let's hang him, let's get this thing going. And he was probably thinking, let's do that again. Let's get some positive feedback here. let's see what's going to happen. But on 76, we see that instead of affirming his prominence over Mordecai, they instead admitted, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. And, the text doesn't say anything about why the change of heart or why, but, obviously they knew that something had changed that day, didn't they?
That's an odd statement. There really is. The text offers no explanation for their change of heart.
That's what I say. They just saw Haman parading him around.
Honored, led through the streets, honored by the king. Then you don't go 10 minutes later and hang him.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to say. It's like, they mentioned that, but then it's like, they just saw him paraded around. All this honor bestowed upon Mordecai. How is Haman expected to go back to the king and say, all right, this guy that you just esteemed and promoted and put up on your horse we need to hang him? That's going to fall on deaf ears, isn't it? I mean, at this point, it's like that's not going to happen. So it's clear that his good fortune seemed to wane. As the conversation occurred, the king's eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. The invitation previously relished would be his last. So there's a lot of events going on in a very short period of time. he was so ecstatic about, oh, it's just me, the queen, and the king, having this banquet. And I've got another banquet we're going to too. Then all this happened in the meantime. He was ready to get Mordecai hung. He was ready to start tearing up, killing the Jews. And he was ready to, go to another banquet. And the day is not going as planned. And then, then they come and get him and say, all right, it's time to go to the banquet. It's like, oh no, now I've got to go to the banquet. After all this, here I thought everything was going to be okay. My day did not turn out like planned, and now I've got to go to this banquet. You can imagine he was not really looking forward to this. He had no idea how bad it was going to be, did he? I mean, it's like things are getting ready to go from bad to worse for him. And so keeping the promise on the first of page 76 in the middle, the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And for the third time, King Ahasuerus asked, what is your petition, Queen Esther? Excuse me. It shall be granted you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom, it shall be done. And like I say, this time she just kind of laid it out, didn't she? She didn't hesitate. She didn't say, let's have another banquet like she had in the past. She's like, now the time has come. With events that happened during the day, she probably knew that, hey, things were looking better because of the way Mordecai was going to be treated, because of what happened and the esteem that was put on it, everything else. So with astuteness, she presented the situation of the king without implicating him. Instead, she begged for her own life and for the lives of her people, verses 3 and 4. Her petition was so moving that the king incredulously responded, who is he and where is he who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? And immediately, Esther immediately responded, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman, and pointed him out. It's like, wow. I mean, so this is like, two whammies in one day, that it went from bad to worse in so many different ways. And, yeah, exactly. And that's what she was saying, her people, and, the king saying, no, what is this? Talking about obviously it'd been better if we'd just been sold as slaves, but, we would have had a hard time replacing all those Jews that are here, but, the king didn't know that, did he? And then he realizes that when she says that, for her people and everything. So not surprisingly, Haman was terrified. And I was thinking the same thing as far as like, once again, wouldn't you like to be the fly on that wall? It went from, things were bad to, oh, wow, I just got accused and she's right. I was planning this. I was planning this to, kill Mordecai, to kill the Jews. It can't get much worse, can it? So, the king, obviously was, he was probably so hot because he couldn't believe it. This is his trusted Haman that he had promoted, years ago, had no idea that he was plotting to kill one of the people that, saved his lives and, the family of the queen, and no idea whatsoever.
He did know that he had proved some people being killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't bother to figure out who they really wanted.
Exactly. So, it's like when all the truth comes out and everything, he sees it all. And the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went to the palace garden. So, he was hot. He was steaming, thinking, how could this wool been pulled over my eyes so easily with Haman? I've got to go cool off for a minute because I'm ready to just, snap. And then imagine, at that point, the king leaves. It's like, okay, this is Haman's chance to say, please, beg and save my life, whatever. Queen, you can change this. You can help me out here, and just begging and pleading. Don't know exactly, what he was doing. Just falling down on the bed with her or whatever, saying, please, save my life. And it says in there, but at the very bottom of 76, whether Ahasuerus had already determined Haman's fate or not, it was decided when the king returned to the garden to see Haman lying on the couch with his queen. And, it's the same thing. It's like, imagine he's just like, please, crying and begging. And king walks in and goes, what's this? You're going to do this even, when I'm in my own palace, my own house with my queen over here? It's over, So, they blindfolded him and covered his head and brought him out. And obviously it was a very swift action. As the word of the king's left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And then Harbonah, one of the eunuchs present, informed the king of the gallows that Haman constructed for Mordecai. So there goes again that, all these little subplots are unfolding here. And after he bestowed the honor on Mordecai, then one of the other eunuchs said, oh, by the way, Haman had made a gallows to hang Mordecai on. If you imagine the king at that point going, wait, we bestowed all this, praise on him, and you were plotting to kill him a long time ago, this gallows and everything. So the response was concise and authoritative, hang him on it. So there again, it's like, final bit of irony, Haman was hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And I thought about this with, another, side story. How many of y'all remember watching the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner? All the time. How many times did the Coyote build a contraption, get a rocket, do something, the Acme Corporation, it was on everything, to try to take this Roadrunner to get him. And they always backfired, didn't they? He had to have a catapult. But what happened, it wouldn't throw the boulder, the whole thing would turn over and, hit the Coyote, then the boulder would fall down from it and land on it again, or whatever. It was always happening that way. And I feel that, this situation with Haman was kind of the same way. He built the gallows, he was planning to hang Mordecai on it, yet it backfired. He was the very one that was hanging on his own gallows. So the king regained his composure, and Mordecai was saved, but nevertheless the Jews throughout the empire remained in jeopardy. So, like I say, there's a lot in here in a short lesson. Are there any other thoughts or comments before we get to the applications? Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like what's he going to do? It's like there'd be another Vashti over again, wouldn't it? Exactly. And like you say, Chuck, that was a very good point. The way she brings it out, the way she says it, it had a lot more credence to it and everything. And then he kind of realized the errors of his way without being stepped on, without being pointed at and everything. So, very good.
We keep coming back to the point, rightly so, about the name of God not being mentioned. But you'd be hard put, or we'd be hard put to find in the scriptures another set of events that more clearly illustrated the working of God than the book of Esther.
Yep.
Even though his name
It's not mentioned exactly. There's always something going on in the background that knows that his hand was at work for sure. All right, so on the applications here. Number one, if the actions of Haman teach us nothing else, they illustrate the dangers of pride. Seeking to help individuals avoid prideful behavior, the author of Proverbs wrote, "Let another man praise you, and not your own mouth, a stranger, and not your own lips." If we wish to be exalted, we must become servants. And Jesus said, if anyone desires to be first, he should be last of all and servant of all. And Haman's example teaches us that self-exaltation is rewarded with humiliation. Humility, on the other hand, is rewarded with exaltation from God. So, sometimes it's hard, isn't it, to be humble or not to be prideful or, not to think that you're doing more than everybody else or you're working harder than everybody else. Maybe you feel like that honor should be bestowed, whether it's work, whether it's, in life, wherever it might be. But, we've got to keep that servant attitude. And then secondly, the delicate way that Esther, as kind of Chuck alluded to, made her request known to King Ahasuerus stands as a wonderful example excuse me, of how to deal with others. Although she could have rightly accused Haman of wrongdoing from the start, any misstep would also have implicated the king. Consequently, she was forced to chart her intervention carefully. Her approach reminds us of the truth of Proverbs 15:1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And I think that's something we can all keep in mind. That, and I had my boss tell me this one time, so yeah, I'm stepping on my own toes here. It's not what you say, but how you say it. You can say the same thing in two different ways, the exact same words, but your attitude about it, your tone, your inflection, how you present it, can have totally different consequences as far as how people are going to respond to you, or how things are going to be in life as far as that goes. So, I remember telling back when I was in Chattanooga a long time ago, kind of told the story of this, that if you say, "Yeah, I got a new car, it's a Porsche, red," versus, "I've got a new car, it's a red Porsche." Same thing, same words, but totally different as far as the exclamation of it. And in the same way, the soft word, a lot of times that's what's going to happen. That's what you're going to need. I'm bad about being harsh real quick, flying off the handle or whatever else. And I think we'd all be served to think about it, to, take a deep breath and to lay out our plan. And a lot of times it's a lot more eye-opening that way than it is just, always flying off the handle, isn't it? All right, any other thoughts? That kind of, I guess you're going to get out of the questions today because we ended up using the whole time, but I'm sure that y'all have looked at them and they're pretty straightforward as well. Any other thoughts or comments as we end? All right, I appreciate your time. And who's next week? Randy will be next week. All right, thank you.